In nomine Patri, et Filii, et Spiritu Sancti. Amen. Welcome to
Amen.
Romanism and Rebellion. I'm Timmy, and here with my co-host Butter.
Greetings!
uh, welcome to I'm already saying welcome again. Hi, this is Romanism and Rebellion. We are a podcast about traditional Catholicism. If you are here to meet us for the first time, we talked a lot, last podcast about the early days of the church. Um,
Specifically
uh,
about
yes,
Martin
sorry.
Luther.
Yes, specifically about Martin Luther, and we talked about why we are a part of this whole traditional church, Catholic Church movement. If you want to look into more of that, or really like why we're doing this here, watch the first episode. Today we're here to talk about All Souls Day and All Saints Day. They both came and passed. All Souls Day being yesterday and All Saints Day being Wednesday. We want to talk about the meanings behind those holidays and the many aspects that those holidays have. So, before we do that, let's just talk about how this week went. For me, let's see. Well, I did go to All Saints Day Mass. I couldn't go to any All Souls Day Masses.
Same here.
Yes, and it's important to go to All Saints Day Masses, especially because it is a holy day of obligation. So everybody should always make sure to attend the holy day of obligation as we're told to.
And
And we are,
always know when they are.
that's a very important thing to know because they can come and pass and you might not know about them. So mine went pretty well. I went to a church near my school. Very lovely mass, and got to know a lot about many different saints. I got a lot of different pins. I think I got one for Saint John the Baptist. I got one for Saint David. I got one for Saint. These are all passing me. I can't remember them all, but other than that, this Sunday, did I know? No, never mind. We already had it. We already talked about that last time about me going to Latin Mass for the first time. So yeah, my All Saints Day went like that. It was pretty great. It was pretty good. How about yours, Butter?
Yeah, I had class like the whole day, and there was one that was really late, and I only could go to the ones that were on campus. So I wound up doing the normal daily mass that they had for. They always have it, but this one was for the Holy Day of Obligation.
Mm.
And surprisingly, there were like no students there. They were all like adults that just stopped by.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I mean, kids had class. But I thought it was really interesting. The it was definitely like different than how it was normally done. But the thing that I liked the best was at the end of it. And apparently we're gonna start getting into a habit of this. Is saying the prayer of Saint Michael, the
Mm.
Archangel, at the end of every
Mm.
single mass,
Well, that's good.
which can never be a bad thing.
Of course. I also forgot mine. Has a there's a school for the church that I went to. It was a daily mass, and the kids from the school were there, so that was really cute. They were like elementary school kids, and they all they all spoke out our intentions, and that they led us in that. It was pretty nice. Um, Other than that, well, Butter, you want to talk about the Catholic history event?
I thought we were going to talk about All Saints Day and All Souls Day and what they
Of
mean.
course, of course. So All Saints Day is the man. I'm just really on top of the ball today. All Saints Day is the basically it's a holiday for all of the saints in the Catholic Church. It comes the day after Halloween, which is pretty funny as it's contrasting the day. Well, Halloween in Irish culture this is where it originates, is basically a day to cast away all demons and all of the unholy by scaring them. And that's really cool to think that All Saints Day comes after it, as it's a day to celebrate all of those who are holy. So it's a contrast. Um, it is dedicated to every saint ever. And, when we think of saints, they are the ones that we know are in heaven. These are the people that are in heaven. These are the people that God has chosen to live there. So the day after, being All Souls Day, is for all of those who are not yet in heaven, those are who are in purgatory, or just anyone in general who is dead. So this would be any of your relatives. This is any person in purgatory especially, and it is for all those who are living too. I think, right? Is it those living?
It's specifically to give God solemn thanks for the lives and deaths of his saints. All Souls Day is everybody, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, yeah. All Souls Day is that.
Yeah, All
Um,
Souls Day is every Christian who has died.
yeah. So these are really important. I think All Souls Day is also in Mexico. It's Dia de los Muertos,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the and I'm amazed that I didn't butcher that pronunciation.
You did.
It's the I did. What is
It's
it?
Dia de los Muertos.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do the tongue roll. Um,
Sí,
Dia de
sí.
los Dia de los Muertos, Muertos.
That
Sorry,
one was good. I like that.
there. Dia de los Muertos. It is
Ah,
the
qué bueno.
okay. It's the day of the dead, and it is basically it is very similar in the All Souls Day. It is the same thing. It's just that they put a lot more into it, and they decorate their lost ones' graves, and they dress up in masks, I believe.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I think that even though sometimes people accuse that specific Mexican custom as being, I guess almost like a deviation of the Catholic holiday, I think the way that they go about things, at least on the surface level, really
Yeah,
does resonate with what the day is supposed to be about. For All Saints Day and All Souls Day, it's supposed to be both solemn days to recognize that even though life is transient, it's a gift from God, and even though people pass away, it doesn't necessarily have to be a mournful thing. Of course, mourning is definitely a part of death, um, especially like those people who, a family member has died. But at the same time, it can be and should be, you know, these days as days for hope that, every soul can get to heaven. E-
definitely. Sorry.
Even though odds are almost certainly that not everyone's in heaven.
Yeah, of course, and it's good to know, when we think of these days, we should be thinking of really what the process of death entails. Specifically All Souls Day, where we're thinking about how many souls there really are in purgatory right now, and how many souls are in heaven right now, and we have to try our best in this life to try and get into heaven, and that's not an easy thing, and we have to cleanse ourselves to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Um, and as we said, you got to show up for holy days of obligation. Those are absolutely necessary. All Saints Day was a holy day of obligation. All Souls Day was not. Um, now that we've talked about that, I think I should let Butter go on to the Catholic history event.
Okay, so for the first specific Catholic history event, I picked the United States, but specifically before it was United States, the early colonies, because it is a part of our heritage, and it's something that we need to know about to figure out where we are now within America. So anti-Catholicism has pretty much existed ever since the first people stepped in Jamestown, Virginia. And it can be found up and down the 13 colonies. So in the Charter of the Plymouth Council in New England, it just straight out banned Catholicism. In Massachusetts, there were some laws, specifically ones in 1674 and 1700, which forbade Catholic priests from living in the colony. And if they violated that rule, then they would be imprisoned and then executed. Virginia, another example, Catholics had their voting rights removed and were fined. And I think this is probably like one of the worst things besides threats of execution, was they actually declared Catholics incompetent as witnesses in trial. So they weren't even allowed to bear witness. And that's like such an essential part of, the Republican type of system that is going on here, whether you agree with it or not. South Carolina granted religious liberty to everybody, and I quote, except papists, end quote. And then there were some better examples. Maryland was chartered specifically to be a place where Catholics could live, free of persecution, but eventually that was overruled as more Puritans colonized the area. And this is probably the most interesting thing I found is New York was the first state to protect confessions from being used as evidence in a court in America. And that's like an essential part of, freedom of religion that this country was founded on. And basically everywhere American Catholics went, regardless of who they were, whether they were native converts or Irishmen mainly, they were treated with lots of suspicion throughout most of America's history, even though, we're focusing on the early time. You don't have to go that far back before, that was also the case. You can think of JFK when he was elected president. Same type of suspicion there.
Yeah, and he was told, he had to tell people that his faith would not come in between him and the church. And, we've been told for many years, especially this, that we would be more loyal to the Pope than we would be to our government. And, that sort of assumption is obviously, anti-Catholic. And what we should also think is, why on earth should we be expected to be more loyal to a government than God? That to me is insane. That sort of thought. I mean, purely, honestly, obviously our church comes before God, but before our country. And the thing is, though, is their assumption of us being more loyal to God to our Pope than to our government. They are the same. They're more loyal to God than their country. I mean, God is first. That is what we were taught. God comes first before all things. Mm-hmm. And that the idea that a state, that a government is more important than any sort of thing like God is insane. No. And but of course that was thrown onto JFK. And even then, there was a woman very recently who was denied by Congress because she was Catholic.
Who was the woman? Was it Feinstein? That said, the dogma lives loudly within you.
Yes, that's what they told her, and it's crazy that no one has spoken up about it. Like, it's just us Catholics who speak up against it, like that sort of thing. It's clearly anti-Catholic. It is so wrong. And all they could do is, some like loosely purported stuff that she said the Bible is more important to me than what was it? I think the Bible is more important to her than the Constitution, which wasn't even true. I don't know if she even said that, but obviously the Bible is more important to us than the Constitution.
Yeah.
We don't like it's a governing body. It is not God.
There was a Bible verse about that. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. So
Yes.
I guess it's probably way too large of a topic to discuss now, but
Yeah.
there is a case for, respecting, the functional laws of a government to
Absolutely.
like
Absolutely we have
collect
to.
taxes and stuff. But like there's some things that you just can't morally abide by. And I think that that's one thing that, even though we said all this stuff, America's not a bad country to
No,
be
no, we love
Catholic.
America. We should
Um,
we should have prefaced that. We love America a lot.
yeah. But I would say, like, specifically with the Catholic school system, you know, right now in some areas it's really poor, but historically, that was a large support for many poor Catholics. Not only to be like a cheap quality education, but also to teach their faith in a world that's hostile to it. And, even today, you can even expand it to pretty much all Christians. As far as secular culture goes, it's hostile to. But the Catholic school system in America, because of America's laws, we're able to preserve it. When I think I read a thing about Canada recently trying to force Catholic schools there, which are, I think, under the thumb of the government, to only teach that which, like, the Canadian government thinks is okay or something like that, which is really, like, truly Orwellian.
Wow, that it's just insane.
I might
Um,
have read it wrong, but it's something like that. And also,
so
as far as America goes, before we jump into the next thing, it's also worth noting that they also hated Anglicans, specifically because the Puritans thought they were too Catholic. Because the Puritans broke off from the break-off group pretty much, so they're doubly schismatic. And I guess we're all just descendants of Cromwell at this point.
yes. Um, so it was Dianne Feinstein who, yeah, she did say the dogma lives loudly within you, and she said it's a concern when you have to come to big issues that large numbers of people have fought for years in this country.
That's what Feinstein said.
Yeah, that's what she said. She's apparently she doesn't like that someone would use their faith. Um, and the thing is for one, like she doesn't like there's like no evidence of this. I mean, there's a lot of like a super left wing sites like Huffington Post and like Al Jazeera, which will say that she did. She said like, we have to rule with our faith, um, which isn't true at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously that's biased.
Yeah.
Um. Anyways, back to what we were just talking about. You know, when we think about like this discrimination, it's insane, and it's just so mainstream to the point where, and it's under our nose the whole time. We have to realize that we have to combat it. Um, yeah, this sort of thing that exists and is being heard on us, we really have to fight it. Do you have anything else you want to say?
I would say that, like, despite the history, especially early on, of Catholics in this country,
Yeah,
um, it should be noted that, we are an integral part of this country. Of course,
absolutely.
when you think about it, the despite our best wishes, it's not a uniformly Catholic country, and we have to recognize that.
Yes.
Um, but we did have our place from the start, and I both am very thankful for that, and very happy of how far we've progressed, in the sense that you know, confessions in every state is protected from being used as evidence in a court. You know, that's like a major one.
Yeah, that's so important. Like that, and people don't realize that. Like we anything that's said in a confession is sacred, and we have to respect that. That is not something that should ever be allowed to be used, and priests are sworn to keep that from being told. Um, of course, if you kill someone, um, as the Bible says, nothing that is secret will not be known. So know of that.
If someone confesses that they killed someone else, do they have to um does the priest have to report it? I think the priest only reports stuff if the confessing person is saying stuff that would put him or other people in immediate danger. I think
I would
that's
Yeah, I would say the
I
priest
think the
would.
priest advises him to turn himself in, like,
Yes,
heavily.
that would be a part of his penance. That would be a part of your penance. Probably. I
Yeah,
mean, what else could be your penance other than turning yourself in? You killed someone. You have to pay for what you did. You have to bring those family solaces. Again, like this is a good point, right? As Protestants always say, why do we have faith by works? It's like it's one thing to feel sorry for something. It's another thing to actually do something about it when you feel bad about it. Do the right thing. It's obviously the right thing in that moment to turn yourself in. That's obviously, and if we did this by faith alone, we could live in secrecy and never suffer the consequences for our actions. But that's not fair. That's just wrong. So you have to suffer that. I could have sworn that there was something in here that you said that made me think of a Bible verse, but of course I forget it.
Okay.
Yes, I know that's extremely weird. Anyways, um, let's move on to what the main topic is of today: saints. So there are a lot of saints that we have listed here for today, and as you were just talking about America, here Butter has Saint Kateri. I'll let you talk about her.
Uh-huh. So, I picked her because she's an essential saint for Native Americans, but also early America in general. And I think that, given her patronage, also, of course, she's a patron of Native Americans, but also to people ridiculed for her faith. Um, and that's something that we can experience too, even today. So I'm going to get into her history. Her name in her native language means she who bumps into things. And I put that there because it's kind of amusing, just like imagining like a toddler with that name. But also, you know, she just wound up, bumping into missionaries, even though, that was a coordinated effort. It wasn't a coordinated effort on her part to meet them. So it's sort of like stands that, you know, sometimes you'll just wind up bumping into things that can bring you closer to God.
Mm.
And so she was the daughter of a Mohawk chief in modern New York. I think at that time it was in New France because of the French missionaries that were able to convert her. So, as most things do, there was smallpox at that time, and it killed many of the people around her, which brought her tremendous sorrow. She did survive, but she would live the rest of her life with scars from the smallpox on her face.
Mm.
And it was something she was always embarrassed about and would always try to hide it. Um, and being like the only Christian among your family must be a difficult thing, especially, these foreign people show up and they're trying to change your way of life. Obviously she took a tremendous amount of hostility for that, but still she stayed true to who she was. And that's an important thing to recognize because, even though we live in a society founded on Christianity, it's not all, even today, it's not even generally pro-Christian. It's not leaning that way at all. Even less so pro-Catholic or even neutral towards Catholicism.
Mm.
And then I would also like to say, as like a point of note, is when the Jesuits were doing their missionary work. And like another thing is they would always try to reach out to where they are. That's always an important part to ministry, is reaching out to people, and going down to their level. And so in doing this, they learned to speak Mohawk, or the language of the Mohawks. And when they would teach them the Lord's Prayer, they would use like the Mohawk name associated with the heavens, to try to like say, you believe this, in a way, but here's like the truth that you have to come at it from. So it's like, while it is kind of, people would say, accepting of, a foreign religion in the way that, sadly a lot of Jesuits do today, it's still worth noting that they constantly rebuked them for their superstitions. And they have the Mohawk Feast of the Dead, which every decade or so, bodies would be exhumed and dug up, so that their spirits could wander out west. And they did that on her funeral, or not on her funeral, after she was buried, years later. And the priest, even when they're doing that to her, said, like, you can't do that. You're basically desecrating a body that should be at rest. So it does show like the necessity to maintain, Christian orthodoxy or Catholic orthodoxy about things like that. And I think that, she, again, like I said, is a very important figure for being someone in America, regardless of whether you're Native American or not, that, very valuable to understand her ability to keep her faith when it's such a difficult thing to do.
Wow, that was an incredibly interesting saint that I've never heard of before just hearing you talk about it right now. I have on here, so a very, I'm just going to go through a lot of basic saints that some of you might not know about, and most likely do. So one of the very first saints, Saint Stephen, he was the very first person to be martyred by Christianity. So he was first mentioned,
not martyred by Christianity,
martyred
for his
martyred for. Okay, he's the first martyr of Christianity.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a good way of putting that. He is first mentioned in Acts of the Apostles. He was one of 7 deacons appointed by the apostles to distribute food and charitable aid to poor people of the community in the early church. So what he did was, one of the reasons that he's a saint is he went to a Jewish temple and told the Jews in that temple about Jesus and his miracles. And, he told stories to them of, basically he told them the whole history of Israel. He told them the whole history of the Bible and the many people in the church that were persecuted. So he told them about Moses and how, God appeared in the burning bush to him, and he led his people out of Egypt, and still the Israelites turned and worshipped other gods. He asked them, was there ever a prophet that your ancestors did not persecute? They even killed those who predicted the coming of Jesus, and now you have betrayed and murdered him. And, they were extremely angered about that. He's ruffling a lot of feathers, talking about, basically that Jesus, that every good person that comes amongst the Jews, they deny him. And of course, Jesus, being God on earth, the prophet that we are told about, well, obviously he's not a prophet, but he is God. And, God came before them and they are denying him and even killing him. And what really drew the last straw was while he was giving this speech, he saw he saw the Son of Man, Jesus, and he said, "Look, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing on the right hand of God." He yelled this loudly, and the Jews were very angry about that, and they shouted and covered their ears and rushed at him, and they stoned him. And yeah, the holy man himself, the holy martyr, this is all written in the Bible, prayed for his murderers. So he prayed for all the people killing him while they were killing him. It's a really it's a it's a very a beautiful sad story, and that's a good idea of what a saint is and what a saint does. Is they are good human beings who live on this earth just like us, and he is in heaven. Next, I have another very early saint. His name is Saint John the Baptist. I'm sure you've probably heard of him. He was born through. He was born by Zachariah and Elizabeth.
I just thought of one thing right before you move forward.
Yes.
Specifically about Saint Stephen, and I guess this will apply to John the Baptist too.
Yes.
But I guess just given their location and the fact that they were martyred, I think that it's important to, I guess, recognize the Christians living in the Middle East and all the places where this is a constant threat that they're under of being killed.
Absolutely.
Because
and that's it.
Like I'm sure that there's some people that would relish in the fact that, Christians there are dying, the same way that, their predecessors did. But, I'd say for them, it should be, a symbol of hope for Christians living in the Middle East. Just something I thought of in regards to St. Stephen.
Absolutely. I just, pulling this up like right this second, because you just reminded me about this, is that according to, if I could get this very soon, so according to some reports, I don't know who specifically did this report. I believe that it was Pew Research, that Christianity is the most persecuted religion in the world at this moment. And that's incredibly important to note, and incredibly important for us to know is that there are many countries in this world that are persecuting Christianity, and we as Christians need to defend our own, because especially those who live in Europe and live in America like us, who aren't suffering as nearly as much as people who are living in Africa, who are living in the Middle East, or really anywhere where this is going on. We are lucky. We're lucky to have this religious freedom right now, and we're lucky to not be suffering like they are. And even in Egypt on Easter Sunday this year, that
was Palm Sunday, I think.
It was Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday, yes. I'm sorry. It was on Palm Sunday that there was a bombing in Egypt, killing people who were practicing their religion. They're practicing their Christianity. I got to go to my mass in peace, and these people are bombed, and it's sad to think of all these children and all these people, innocent human beings who are praying to God, are being killed. And it's the same thing for Stephen. Stephen was killed.
I just thought of another thing now. I can't pull it up. It was in a video, and it'll be way long to pull through. But I think it was specifically Iraqi Christians when terrorists were going after them. I don't know if it was ISIS or something previous. But they would basically say, like, are you going to renounce your faith in Jesus Christ and convert to Islam? If you don't, we'll shoot you. And I think something like 91%, some ridiculously high number by our standards, just chose to die
Oh
because
yeah.
that's what they believed in. And I think we're both, facing crises in different ways. But in that way, we should really look to even Middle Eastern Christians compared to our own circumstances as heroes, in
Mm.
so many ways, especially ones that are, under immediate threat of Islamism and other religious violence.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Actually, they were killed by ISIS.
It was
And
ISIS.
yeah, they were slaughtered on the beach. And I believe they
No,
said
I know that that was in like Tunisia.
yeah.
I was talking about, it was like a survey done. I don't know how
Oh,
you take a survey of that.
I
Um,
see.
or maybe it was just one event because everyone died in the one you were talking about. I don't,
Okay,
I don't know if it was a survey or not. It's just the takeaway is that they are very, very faithful,
I
and
see.
in a time when we're losing our faith as a country, you know, we need to pray for them and for us, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely. So so moving on to Saint John the Baptist, he is also one of the earliest uh saints, and he is the son of Elizabeth and Zachariah, who were both very old, and basically most people didn't think they were going to be able to have him. But the angel Gabriel visited them both and told them they would have a son. This happens a lot in the Bible, by the way. The
Mm-hmm.
Abraham and Sarah. Sarah being very old, they also said to her, like many people thought that she was too old, that she already had her, she already stopped having her period, and they believed that she wasn't going to be able to have kids. But lo and behold, they were able to have Isaac,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which makes the story of you know Abraham almost killing Isaac for God very. It's one of the most incredible sacrifices. Um, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. I'm getting a little bit off topic of that. But so Zechariah, when he heard this from the angel, he didn't really believe. He didn't really believe the angel, so he stopped talking. He became
Mm-hmm.
mute for a long time, and he until John was born, and then he was incredibly amazed when Elizabeth was pregnant. She went to Mary. She visited Mary. They were good friends, and John leapt. He jumped out in his womb, and Elizabeth said to Mary, "Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb." I believe that's what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's from that. Okay, I'm checking him because I'm doing a lot of this off memory. But after all of this, after John being finally born, he was really one of the first. He is what people refer to him as the man before Jesus, because a lot of people thought of him as the precursor, like sort of to Jesus,
He even said
because
that himself.
yes, because he said that about himself.
No, he said that himself. There's a man coming before me whose
Yeah.
sandal I'm not fit to touch.
Yes, yeah. He was telling a lot of people about Jesus is coming, and he was baptizing people. He was, I think, one of the earlier baptizers, because this was not a common practice amongst Jews, right? And this,
I don't think it was at all.
yeah, it wasn't a practice amongst Jews at all. So he was doing that, and he evangelized Jesus. He made Jesus become, well, he really helped Jesus in his faith, definitely. And when Jesus came to Jesus, he told Jesus, "It is I who needs baptism from you." And Jesus was like, "All right, well, you can still baptize me," and John did, of course. Um, John then told all of his followers to follow Christ, and these were basically the first Christians, and these were the many disciples, and this really made John incredibly popular. Um, and basically, he set off the alarms of King Herod, and King Herod arrested him, and John spoke out on King Herod because he condemned King Herod's marriage, uh, because King Herod was married to his half brother's wife. Yeah. And this condemnation basically made King Herod kill him. He basically immediately executed John the Baptist. And again, a lot of these early Christians, they died in vain. There are very few people who were early Christians who didn't die in some horrible way.
I actually am thinking one right now. Another saint that I actually heard about today that I didn't know before. So I'm going to have to look it up on the fly. I think I found it. So there's a saint named Saint Denis in France.
Mm.
And he was basically sentenced to die. I don't know much about his story. I only heard of his martyrdom. For some reason. And they were going to march him up to the top of a hill and they were going to kill him. But the way I was told it, and I'd have to fact check this later, is they cut off his head halfway up the mountain, and the story goes he picked it up and walked all the way up the remainder of the mountain without his head attached to his shoulders.
Wow.
He probably deserves, much more than just that. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, that's what Wikipedia says at least. After his head was cut off, Dennis is said to have picked it up and walked several miles to the summit of the hill, preaching a sermon the entire way up. That's kind of interesting.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, we spoke about a lot of saints, and I know that many people are wondering, like, especially Protestants, probably wonder why do we care so much about these saints and these holy people? Well, there are many verses from the Bible, but I wanted to call it this very specific verse, which is Hebrews 13:7, which says, "Remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God. Consider the outcome of their life and imitate their faith." That is the Bible verse of today's podcast. And really what that means is we have to try and be like those who are good, those who have who have spoke to us the word of God. These are what the saints are. These are the holy people who come before the church.
Especially the evangelizers in that quote you have there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And these are the really important people of our church. And and that's why we canonize people. That's why we have all these prayers about them. We're not praying to them. We're asking them to pray for us. It's Saint in the Hail Mary, the most prominent prayer for a saint there is. We ask Mary to pray for us. And I know, the idea that we say Hail Mary is seen as somewhat sacrilegious, or is seen as religious, and, martyring her. And, well, not martyring her, but making her seem to be a god. That's not necessarily true, as that's a common way of praising someone, especially during that time.
I guess
so, yeah.
Another thing with like Protestantism and, say someone's ill, Protestants, pretty much, any person who believes in God will say, "Can you pray for me or whoever's sick?" And
Yeah.
Basically, anyone whose soul is not directly, divorced from God, as in they're in hell. And I guess purgatory as well, because that's something I'm not too familiar with right now. But that people that are in heaven, their souls are are still united to God. So if, a prayer on earth, works, it's because, you're united with God. So to those in heaven. So there should be no issue with any Christian about that, especially people that for certain are in heaven, which is what the saints are.
Yeah, of course. As I've said though, as we were just saying though, yeah, saints are models. They're people we should look after. These are the type of people that we should want to be. Well, I don't know if you have any more things to say. We've definitely gotten through a lot.
I would say to to all 10 of you that made it this far, we're gonna try and make shorter videos and spam them on the internet.
Definitely. We're gonna try it.
Check out our Twitter wars.
Yeah.
What's the ad on Twitter?
Hold on.
rum_rebellion.
No, wait, hold on. Let me check the Twitter handle that I have. It is rum_rebellion. Follow that on Twitter. I have a lot of great, because I was posting about All Saints Day, and I was posting about the Protestant Reformation. Of course, I got a lot of lovely arguments that I've basically shattered. Anyhow,
you're like the new Stefan Molyneux.
Oh, definitely, I'm the new Stefan Molyneux. Free to Mind Radio here.
Okay.
Getting into better things. We'll conclude our podcast with our next prayer, which is as we started off last podcast with the most basic prayer, which is the signs of the cross. We're moving on to the Our Father, which goes as so: Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Amen. Yeah, it was nice talking to you, man.
Yeah, absolutely.